For anybody who doesn't know me on this call, although I think I have met just about everybody so far, my name's Jane Turner, and I run a business called writewithjane.com, helping authors to write their books, publish their books, and promote their books. And Petra and I have been on a bit of a journey together. Her book is almost ready. It's a wonderful book called The Actual Normal. And I won't go into too much detail here, except to really welcome you all, and especially to welcome you, Petra. So I'd love to open the conversation with you just telling us a little bit about the book.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you all hear me all right?
Nice and clear.
Well, we're all familiar with the new normal, which is a world of change that we've all been grappling with. And my book began because my husband was diagnosed with cancer and stage 4. And when his employers found out, they let him go. And it was a very difficult time for both of us, not knowing if he would make it or not. And I was plunged into a very disorientating experience where I really, I think, lost myself. And one day I realized that actually what I was going through was probably something that wasn't so abnormal. It was really, really deep suffering and a disconnection from self. And I said to my husband that what I thought was normal wasn't. And that was how the sort of genesis, well, that was the genesis of The Actual Normal. And essentially what had happened was that I was like so many middle-class Westerners who had the idea that I would be happy if I got all these things in my life, and the way to get there was to be successful. And I've lived in 3 different countries in pursuit of this dream, and we had moved to Australia finally, and my husband had got this great job, and I think within a year of him getting that job, he got his diagnosis. And so that was the outside story that then fell away, and I was suddenly confronted by my own stories, the ones that were going on inside, which was that I was my life, you know, the construction that I had, the things that I had, the way that I looked, the opportunities that were there were what actually sort of defined me and made me me. And without all of that, I couldn't be me. There were a lot of shoulds and shouldn'ts in my head. You know, this shouldn't have happened, or that should have happened, and how dare they actually let my husband down in his moment of need. Life isn't fair. And, you know, then there were all the what if questions. If only I had done this or I hadn't done that. And ultimately the conclusion was that I was terribly fallible and I had caused myself to end up in this situation. And yeah, in that situation, I lost myself. I didn't have a sense of my own resources that I could turn to. I didn't have any resilience to what had happened to me. I was just this leaf blowing in the wind and wishing to get off the planet. And eventually I was thinking, I'm not enough and I'm pointless. I might as well not be here. And I became unable and unwilling to try because I believed that I couldn't impact or control anything. And so that was really the dark night of the soul that I went through. And I thought maybe what I would sort of do to sort of explain what I really found out about was I came across various different things in my journey. And one of them was something from David Foster Wallace, who quoted in 2005, where he told the story of these 2 young fish swimming along who happened upon an older fish swimming the other way. And the older fish nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" As they pass by him. And the 2 young fish swim on for a bit. And eventually one of them looks at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" And so really what I came to discover was that we see the world through a particular lens, one that we've been given by our family and our culture. And, you know, the world is this way and we are this way, and this is how we need to kind of roll and play by the rules in order to get the outcomes that we're looking for. So the particular things in our modern Western cultural ideas, which I found particularly disempowering actually, were this idea of happiness and success as normal. And in this whole losing myself and grief journey, I found that there really wasn't much tolerance for the fact that I was complaining that I was in so much pain and I wanted to die. I was told I had a first world problem. My husband and I still had our house and he wasn't dead. So what was I going on about? I should think about all the poor people in the world and how difficult things were for them. And eventually what I could settle for was the label of having a mental illness, which didn't resonate with me. And I didn't want to confess to that. I didn't feel that was the case, but I had actually lost myself. And I think that, many of us who are struggling with things do struggle with that concept of you have a mental illness because you're depressed or you're sad. But essentially the business of being sad has been delegitimized in our world. And
that makes so much sense, Petra, doesn't it though? Is it not okay to be sad?
No, not at all. You're supposed to be happy. You're supposed to be happy. And, if you're not, then there's some dysfunction there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that was also made worse by the fact that, there's so much emphasis on having and doing and getting more and, more houses and more watches and more cars and whatever else. And people who are living extraordinary lives are portrayed by the media as being actually quite normal. We'll see, the Kardashians, for example, maybe it's a silly example, but there seems to be an ordinary family, but they're all, worth so much money, and they've made it all by managing to kind of conjure an image. And then, of course, it all came true. But a lot of us think, well, if we just do all those things, maybe we can also get them. And certainly that was a script that I had bought into. So, essentially the media are normalizing what's not normal. So one of the things that I've written about in my book is, based on this David Foster Wallace idea, this is the water. And the water is, reality. We're all going to die. And ultimately, we only have a certain period of time that we're here to make something of our lives. And, neither my husband nor I had really thought about that. But here he was faced with potential of being dead within 5 years, and we hadn't had that conversation. And, all the sort of efforts that we'd been making were sort of setting that to the side as if we could live forever. And we really needed to kind of focus in on what was really important in our lives and what we did want to achieve. And if it ended tomorrow under the wheels of the bus, that we had kind of stepped forward into something. The other reality is that we'll all be judged. This is a society that has got everything set up around the ideas of right and wrong and good and bad. We see that a lot in our ideas at the moment of cancel culture. Not that it's an Australian one, but, it's certainly out there in the world. And, one of the worst things is that we judge ourselves. Certainly I did. I was ultimately I diagnosed myself as being pointless because I hadn't achieved these successes that were apparently the markers of a good life well lived. And then lastly, not lastly, but the third aspect to reality that is, one of the key things is we will all suffer. Sorry, I just need a little sip of water. And, it's not just because since the Second World War, we've rebuilt our nations where they had been bombed to smithereens. We've lived in this time of incredible opportunity. We've seen the rise of so much enabling technology. Most of us have moved out of poor and into middle class, with a lot of disposable income and choice. And yet, despite that, we will suffer. We may get divorced, or we may become disabled, or we may lose our home or our job or our health or whatever. But there isn't tolerance for that because the mental health industry sort of delegitimized it. And so I feel that I really have wanted to bring to everybody's attention that actually we're sort of living with our blinkers on. And when I look at what's going on in the world right now, where there has really been such a rise of people falling out of the middle classes and into poverty even, there's a huge amount of suffering and uncertainty, not just with the fact that since 2008, so many things have shifted in our world. For example, many jobs have disappeared because we've moved our production sources to the Far East, for example, or robotics have come along and made a lot of jobs go away. And there's overpopulation and there's climate change and now there's COVID and we've all been in lockdown. You know, suffering is something that's going on and it's not going to go away. And people are confused about the fact that this is a reality in their life. But, you know, really this sort of, I suppose the key insight really for me in this experience was that it's not what actually happens to us, it's what happens inside of us that becomes the real trauma, because we form conclusions. You know, in the words of Marcus Aurelius, if you're distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. It is such an empowering way of thinking about things, you know, that we actually just tell ourselves a story about things. And so the actual normal is about busting the myth of the new normal or the previous normal or anything that we thought was normal. Like, what is human life really about? And so that's what I sat down to write, was to find out how to cope with this sort of situation in the modern world, and how we ourselves can rally and come out strong and overcome difficulty in our lives without getting lost and disconnected from ourselves and feeling broken. Was ultimately one of the key aspects of reality is that we're not here to have a job or be successful or have and do things. We're here to grow. You know, if we think about anything in life that lives, it is growing towards the best version of itself and into thriving. And this is actually what we're here to do as well. And very often we end up in comfort zones where we feel empowered and we know where the edges of them are. And there's no need to kind of change the status quo. And then along comes suffering and prods us out of those and into growth. And so we can actually honor suffering for having a very particular role in our lives, but we do need to be equipped to deal with it.
And you coach people around this space, Petra.
I do. You know, I found that in the beginning, people would want counseling because they were so broken about the death of somebody. You know, they have been thrown to the sidelines of their own lives and disempowered, and now simply have to go forward. And it's, you know, the pain becomes the path actually to transformation, you know, in them. So much of our mental health industry is talking about the fact that there is pain and needs to be got rid of. So we can take a tablet or we can get some counseling and then it's repaired and we kind of go back to something. But in fact, we actually use that pain to transform ourselves into our next best iteration. We incorporate it into our lives. And, you know, when we can't change a situation, we become challenged to change ourselves. That's the only way that we can end up coping. And so the more that the world has become unraveled, the more that I've got people coming and seeing me about other losses that they're grieving and they don't know where to go, because, you know, if you're bereaved, there's support for that. And if you're depressed, postnatal depression, or, you know, long-term chronic conditions of depression, then you'll be in the care of a psychiatrist and you can be on medication and so on. But what happens to the ordinary person who is grieving these dreadful things that have happened in their lives because everything that they've worked for has sort of fallen down around their feet, and they've lost themselves in that? So yeah, that's where I spend a lot of time working with people to reconnect to themselves and to find out exactly where their power is and how they can reconstitute their lives and go forward into something even better.
That idea of losing oneself, it's a very potent kind of I think, well, I can only speak for myself. I certainly can get a sense of what that feels like. You know, I've been through redundancy. I've lost both parents. I lost a brother a couple of years ago. And it's that thing of that loss, what beyond the, and I don't even know what language to use properly. Actually, I need to revisit your book, Petra, but it's that the grief, the experience, the lived experience that, you know, if we can, we should, and in inverted commas, allow ourselves to feel.
Yes.
And then to what extent does that become a part of our story? Do we, you know, it's all very quite complicated, isn't it?
Well, it is. You know, I mean, if we already have the idea that we are all going to die. We've been gifted a period of time where we're here. It's actually less traumatic to lose people in some ways, you know, because we're not pretending that we're all going to live forever. All our power is vested in the outside world, in power over, you know, what can we have and do, and who can we be with, and what can we control? And when we discover that we actually have limited control in that domain, and we're seeing that more and more with the world unraveling, we haven't actually developed those inner resources like grit and compassion, self-compassion, you know, the character traits that really help us to withstand periods of difficulty, then we do feel very lost and disconnected, because our power that is within us has been lying dormant. You know, in the past, people have always struggled with things, and we know many notable people who have done incredible things in the face of adversity, because they've called something up from within themselves to face that difficulty. You know, the real difficulty with life is that we can be in this beautiful place in it and wish it could go on forever. But the reality is that it won't. And that is simply how it is. It's the strangest thing to have to try to come to terms with, is where we've kind of entered into an agreement with life. I will let you be here for a certain amount of time. I won't tell you how long that is. And when I decide it's done, it's done. What are you going to do in the meantime? And who will you become? Because I do believe that, you know, our journeys here are about becoming those thriving versions of ourselves, to become all that we can be, and whatever it is that we think about that we would like, to become what we need to be to bring that into life. You know, just a sort of small example of that would be Elon Musk, for example, who has entered into the electric vehicle industry, which has actually been around for quite a long time. And he has brought something to it that nobody else has been able to. He's also managed to put NASA pretty much out of business because of SpaceX, where he has been able to refine and improve the process such that we can now have reusable rockets that come back to Earth and don't just have to become space junk. Now, you know, obviously he's a stellar example, but the point is that potential was always in the electric vehicle industry and in NASA, and nobody else was able to somehow bring it to life. But we're all here. We all have something that we can bring to life. We need to find out what that is, and do our best to bring that into being through who we are and how we show up. But many of us are in a situation of learned helplessness, you know, where we feel like we're in a pattern and there's a set of rules, and if we just follow them, we won't get into any trouble and bad things won't happen to us. And even in this situation that we're looking at now in the world, governments or big business or somebody has to come in and fix the problems. We don't recognize that we ourselves could be part of creating a solution, because we do have the power to do that, each one of us. And when we connect into that power, our whole life can change.
Interesting stuff. What's the key to tapping into that power? In 20 words or less.
The key is understanding that we are different to any other species on this planet. You know, all the animals that are here have all the same sort of attributes that we do, biology, and often they're part of families, and they've got this incredible will to survive. And their technique is how. They know how to do things. I mean, within 10 seconds of being born, an animal can be walking. We don't know how that all happens. I mean, but human beings are different because we have a consciousness that is much greater. And by consciousness, I don't mean spirit, although it could be something a little bit like that, but it's an awareness of ourselves in context that an animal doesn't have. It's an awareness of the fact that we have a certain amount of power that we can deploy in a particular way. So we ask questions, we ask why. We learn by understanding, not by asking just the question how, but why. Because when we know why, we can put various different things together, and we can put it into, you know, context in the great order of things, and we can attach significance to things. This thing weighs more than that, and this is more important. So then we can orientate ourselves much more deliberately, much more consciously. I don't think that was 20 words, Jane, but
no, and that's okay. That opens up then another question, of course, too, because that capacity of why is then a burden in a sense, because what determines the way we can answer that? And that's, I guess, the
exactly
things we're exposed to.
Yeah. You know, we do ask why do these things happen to us, and where is my power? So we can actually then generate an internal experience that is incredibly disempowering and painful, particularly when we don't actually have a wider awareness. You know, we live in these little silos of a little silo of self, I like to call it, which is a context. You know, we're in a bigger context, but we're in this little silo, and we only know what we know. We only know what our experiences offered us, what our culture has offered us, what our parents and our education has offered us. And so we don't recognize that we may not have full awareness of everything. And we can also give the wrong attribute, the wrong meaning to something. You know, we give weight to things that are not important. You know, how thin am I is really, really important in our world, rather than how healthy am I. But if we're not thin and we're not on Instagram and we're not doing all those things, then maybe something we've decided, you know, and it's that kind of thing that can really send us off down the wrong path. The answers that we give ourselves to why can be quite dangerous. And it's, you know, I think when life comes along and disrupts those constructs, though, that silo of self is suddenly opened up to a possibility of finding out, there's another way of looking at this. I don't have power because I do this thing, or I look this way, or I have that thing. I have power because of how I show up in the face of adversity, or how connected I am to other people, or what my contribution is.
And is that one of the things people will take out of reading the book? When you project forward now and think of somebody sitting down and reading that book, which I must say is so beautifully written, what will you imagine they take away from that experience?
Well, the big thing is I want to give, there's a hole in our dialogue around all of this. You know, we don't have the words. We've decided that we're biology, but I'm writing about the fact that we actually have an experience and that we're asking these questions, and that they're not questions that can be scientifically proven or anything. I mean, none of the things I've said today particularly could be scientifically proven. And unfortunately, so much of that sort of wisdom actually gets left on the side, because we have actually reduced our dialogue into what the medical health industry will talk about. So what I want to do is normalize this experience. You know, so many people who are suffering, particularly middle-class Westerners, where previously the domain of suffering was somewhere else. More and more we're finding that it's hard for us. So normalizing things really helps people, you know, to rally, to feel that they're not singled out and a victim of something. I want to contextualize what's happening, because while grief and suffering are obviously individual personal experiences, there is a collective suffering that's going on. And really what I want to do is encourage people not to be running from pain. You know, in a way, that is the greater cause of our suffering, is if I shouldn't have the pain. It's how can I be curious about it? How can I use the pain as a path to become who and what I can become? So the other part of the book is creating an awareness about how all of this fits together and what we can practically do about it. You know, the unique powers of the human species are that we are generative. Everything that exists in the world today, in the human world, came about because of a thought. Somebody thought that thing and then put it into action, and now the thing exists. And much of our suffering is generated internally because of the kinds of thoughts that we're having. And the actual normalness seeks to help you with the way that you're thinking about things, because you can't do anything about what you can't see. But when you see it, you can make a different choice. And our choice alongside thought is generative. It is a creative act that works in accord with the law of cause and effect. Every choice is cause. and it ripples out into the world as an effect some way. Every single thing that you put in your mouth is having an effect. Everything that you say to another person is having an effect. You are cause. And when you can start to use your choices, not reactively, so often we're in a reactive pattern, but responsively, I'm thinking about how I'm going to come at this, then your choices become really powerful. They truly generate great things in your life, The thing that Carl Jung said was, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But actually, it is your choices that are directing your life. And when you know that and you can tune into that, then you can truly be powerful in your life and create what you need by becoming who you need to be to create that. So yes, that is what I hope my readers will take away from my book.
That really makes a lot of sense. And what's interesting sitting here and listening to you now is that it's a quiet message. Yours is a quiet and thoughtful approach. And that's the challenge here, I think, is to make a space for people to be able to hear something it's not sexy, it's not dramatic, it's just very grounded, powerful, and logical. And this is just something I really appreciate about you. And I'm sure that in a coaching context as well, the space that you can hold for somebody to have, I guess, among other things, a reality check.
Yeah. Thank you, Jane, for that. Look, I mean, I think the time is ripe for change. I hope I've arrived at the right moment in time with this book, because there is a collective suffering going on, and it's a different kind of suffering than we've experienced before. And just COVID itself put the word mental health illness kind of very much on the table where it hadn't been before. We were talking to Olivia Ong last week about the fact that many doctors are in a situation where they don't want to put their hand up and say, I'm depressed and I'm struggling, because then they'll get that label of you have a mental health illness and suddenly they won't be able to work. And it's that very wrong idea about the fact that we need to kind of see pain as a temporary thing that just gets dealt with and then moved on from, rather than it's part of our personal story, and it can sit alongside what we're doing. The pain does not have to be in the driver's seat. It can be in the back seat or beside you. You can still drive your vehicle and have it along with you. But when we integrate this into a path of personal development, we're empowered from the word go. And right now we're looking at record levels of suicide in the world, record levels in men and young people particularly, which is very concerning, because they're meant to be hopeful and kind of a bit blind to the future realities that are potentially there. But people just don't know what to do. And if I have arrived at the right time with this message, and I get anywhere with it, I really do hope that people will understand that we don't have to see this kind of pain and suffering as an indication that we're broken in some way. We're actually living a very, very normal experience, and there are tools that we can deploy to help ourselves to, rally and actually come out stronger and happier and better than ever. So yes, if the timing is good and so on, then I hope that it will gather momentum in its own way. I've no idea, but it hasn't been a sexy subject. But I do think that it is one that is more and more people are engaging with.
Actually, I need to unmute myself before I talk. I was just going to say absolutely, because what it does do, it's not a loud message, but it's a message that definitely resonates with everybody I talk to about this. They say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That kind of, it changes everything.
Yeah, I hope so. When we don't make a thing wrong, then we can use it powerfully. We can actually feel able to deal with it. We can find those resources within us, because we're not broken after all. This is something that everybody is going through, and even if they keep it hidden. So yeah, it becomes something very normalized, the actual normal, rather than a kind of abnormal.
Fantastic. Look, I think this would be a good time for us to open up for questions. Petra, what do you think?
Yeah, very happy to take.
You're ready?
Yes,
yeah.
sure.
All right. Anybody got a question for Petra, or a comment, a reflection to share?
Or is that uncertain time?
That's right. Nobody wants to talk over the top.
No,
of anybody
I
else.
actually have it.
Yay, go,
Carol-Anne.
go, Carol-Anne.
I do have a number of comments and questions. So Jane, please tell me to shut up.
I will, but you go for your life now.
What you're talking about, Petra, reminds me of two books that I came across many years ago, and I can't remember the writers. The Paradox of Choice and the impact that actually has on us, and I'm going to say distress it can actually cause, because we have so much. And the other thing is the awareness trap, how much our personal development around what we think and how we think can actually enable us to get so overwhelmed by our own thinking almost. I find like it's a knotted ball of wool in our heads that we have to try and unravel. And it can be quite distressing when we realize that, in your own words, Petra, we're losing ourselves because there's so much information. We don't know what to identify with. So it really resonated there for me in so many ways. I did wonder also, I did wonder, did you write the book as you were experiencing all of this, or was it more an aftermath?
Yes, I did write it while I was experiencing it, and it's one of the reasons it's taken me so long. You know, initially it was, oh my God, you know, the actual normal is that there's a lot of suffering in life, and I need to alert people to this. And I was angry about it, and I suppose I sat down and was quite strident about the disaster that had befallen me, and how it wasn't a first world problem. It really did hurt. Thank you very much. And then I noticed after the 2008 GFC, so this happened actually in 2011. And then there was an increasing amount of coverage in the news about people who were doing it tough. And then there was Brexit, and then there was Trump. And I went, oh, actually, maybe this isn't my experience only. You know, this is a broader malaise that I'm seeing. And this is why these voters are voting the way that they are. And so then the direction of my writing changed. And that's why it's taken a long time, because I've been trying to suss out what is going on in the world, and why do we think about it the way that we do, and think about ourselves in it as we do. So yes, it really has been a personal journey of transformation, but the book isn't so much that really as a distillation of the insights that I got along that way. You know, I do want to just say that in terms of awareness, yes, I understand what you're saying, that it can be overwhelming, but it's about focusing on the things that are important and that do matter, which is why I have a chapter called "This is the Water." We can suffer from our thoughts, we can suffer from overwhelm.
Yeah.
When we're very, very clear about what is important and how what the true purpose of life is, for example, which is that it's to grow, we can let go so much of this other stuff and be relieved in it. And so, yes, and you know, the business of choice, I always say, where there is choice, there is misery. But at the same time, it is about knowing what makes a truly powerful choice and thinking about what the effect of that choice is, so that you're deliberately being a creator, rather than, you know, I suppose, answering your personal wishes or whatever. There are different levels of choice in that sense. And this book is about showing you what is truly important and how to be empowered with choice and awareness, not how to live in a really busy Western life and being overwhelmed by so many things. It is to cut through some of that clutter and make things, well, to basically empower you to be your greatest self and to manage the difficulties in your life.
If I could just say that's exactly right. I'm a couples therapist, and what I find is exactly this issue, that in order for them to discover what is truly important in as a couple, but also personally in their lives, they need to understand what their values are in life, and it kind of stems from that. And it's really very powerful work, because nobody actually takes a step back and looks at, well, what are my values? What do I believe in as an individual? And then what do we believe in as a couple? And therefore live our life accordingly and raise our children accordingly. And that is probably one of the core things that I find that really helps a couple develop, you know, very strongly.
I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, we actually look at values as on a continuum, where on one hand we have desires as values. I desire, or I value being fit and all that kind of stuff. And on the other hand, we have values which are more intrinsic ones. You know, I have honor and I don't lie and I take responsibility and so on. And it is finding that place in between. And I think that your choices really get very, very simplified when you're on the moral spectrum side of things, rather than the I desire spectrum side of things, you know, because then you are pulling from a common ground. And again, that has simplified things, because all your choices then are made out of that place, not out of desire, which is often to do and to have rather than to be. The other end of it is, this is who I will be. This is who we will be. This is what our family will be. So we will raise our kids in terms of that. And that also simplifies things a lot. And yes, I covered that in the book as well.
Oh, do you? Brilliant.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, one last thing. Well, it's not the last one, but I'll make it the last one. Would you say you have now found yourself?
Yes, I have. And it doesn't mean I don't suffer and I don't feel self-doubt. Jane will tell you that I do. But, you know, I know who I am, and I know what I need to do to re-empower myself in those moments. I know which way I'm going. I'm very excited to be in this place in my life, and I'm trying to really work on much more self-compassion. You know, that is a work in progress. And, you know, I think that I have been reborn in a very different way than I expected I would be. You know, it's so amazing to think that I was in this place of dissolution and loss and nothingness, and actually wishing to get off the planet. Whereas now I'm so excited to try and be part of something, to make a contribution. Because, you know, just taking a step back, you know, what I would like ultimately is to empower people to be making different kinds of choices. Just this one thing, for example. Make different kinds of choices, thinking about how they go out into the world. And we can all together collaboratively start to change the effects that we are seeing now. We don't have to get big business or something else like that to come in. We can do it. And that is such a powerful and wonderful message. And if everybody was living out of that place, it would just be so exciting. So,
yeah. Yes. Now, there's a great question that Karen's put in the chat box, which is about just asking you to talk a little bit about making decisions on your gut instinct in the absence of evidence. And I love that word, actually, Karen, that the idea of evidence.
Well, it's a difficult thing to talk extemporaneously about. I do think that we need to come to self-trust. You know, we've been told, we live in this soup of this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad. Here's the judgment, you know, and we can very quickly get disconnected from our own internal voice. When you're very clear on what your values are and you're living in integrity with those, then you know what you should and shouldn't do, what, you know, just in terms of, say, your own conscience. And you are much more able, therefore, to trust yourself. I do what I say I will do. I am a person who is integrous. And when you're in that place, it is a lot easier to listen to your own internal voice. And that doesn't mean to say that you don't necessarily do research, ask for advice, and so on. But once you have gathered all that information, you can make an intuitive and informed decision and trust it. And you know what? If it's wrong, well, then you've learned something, because we do learn through failure. We don't have to see it as a dreadful blot on our copybook. We can know that that's just part of how we learn things. But, you know, there's a saying that, you know, the best thing that you can do is something. The worst thing you can do is nothing. I'm not sure that I've quoted that right, but I think we can very easily become disabled and sit on the sidelines of things because we don't want to get it wrong. I've got this little poster on my wall behind me that says, "What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?" You know, this venture of mine could very well not really go anywhere. But on the other hand, to me, there's such a possibility in it. And I'm so excited about what it could truly bring to the world if I dance this dance well. So I would just say, you know, trust yourself, make your intuitive decisions, do your research, but then trust yourself. And if it doesn't work out well, then go back to the drawing board and do something else.
Great answer. Who has another question for Petra?
Hi, Petra. First of all, thank you for making the time to speak with us, and thank you, Jane, for organising it. Your book sounds amazing, and it sounds as though there's a lot of things that are resonating with me. I guess I have two quick questions. Number one, you talk a lot about accepting the pain and growing through it, and we have choices that you know, makes better people and whatnot, and embracing the whole aspect of pain in order to become a better person. I guess my question is, to what extent do we have a responsibility to other people? Because the choices that we make in order to grow will inevitably affect other people. And where do we draw the line of, okay, I'm being selfish because I want to grow, yet my decisions are impacting other people? Is this something that you mentioned possibly in your book?
I'm just wondering what's behind your question.
So what I'm going through at the moment is a separation, and I'm feeling incredibly guilty on the impact that it's having on my children. And so that is something that I'm dealing with at the moment, and you know, thinking, okay, am I being selfish in that kind of respect?
Barbara, I would say to you that you need to be your most empowered, happy self, to be a great mum, to lead the way for your children into a healthy life. You know, cutting something of yourself off for somebody else can be really, really destructive rather than constructive, and your kids will know it. I mean, there is compromise, there is collaboration. The way that the separation is done makes all those things puts them into a better place. But you know, ultimately, I think it is important to be true to yourself. It is important to become your best, happiest self, because that is what your children will truly experience of you. And you know, we do live in a society where we don't see that our children have any inner metal to deal with things. You know, losing has become participation, and you know, we need to kind of lawn mow the sort of weeds away so that our kids have this nice clear path forward. And I don't think we serve our children in that, honestly. I think that explaining to children that how life works, and that there's sometimes pain, and that they actually have the inner resources to meet that. They have resourcefulness, they have grit, and yes, sometimes they'll have sadness, but they'll get through it, and it's the best way. I mean, you wouldn't be separating if this wasn't the best way forward. So your children need to come to the table with that as well, I would say. And I think that you can trust that they have within them what it takes to get through it and not be broken.
Thank you. And I guess my second question is very ignorant. What is the name of your book? When is it released? I'd love to purchase it.
It's called The Actual Normal, and it will be released in October. There's no doubt about that. Now, how many times have I told Jane and so on that it will be? But no, I'm there. I'm just about there now. So it will be released in October. I will put that on LinkedIn. I'm not sure where you found this meeting from, but hopefully, you know, you'll notice when I say it's ready. Cheers, bye.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good luck with it all.
Questions. Thank you.
Great. And we've got another one in the chat box now. This is from Victoria, who helps people with their personal style.
Yeah.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, what's this got to do with anything? Well, actually, the name of Victoria's book is What's Style Got to Do with It? And it's actually quite a deep exploration of the mindset that people bring to the decisions they make about what they wear.
Yes.
And so this, how did you actually phrase it? I've just gone off now, Victoria, and gone all rogue on your question. You're saying what impact does pain and loss have on general outlook, and which of course then reflects on what people choose to wear, notwithstanding the fact I'm completely in black today. And most days for that matter. But what an interesting question.
Yes, it is. Look, I think that one of the things that's so lovely about human beings is that we present ourselves in so many different ways, in so many creative ways, whether we have tattoos or whatever hairstyle we have, you know, the shape of our glasses, the kind of jewelry, you know, we're very self-expressed in that. And I think that lovely, creative, expressive side of ourselves also then tells the outside world the kind of person that we are. You know, we've got goths and we've got hippies and we've got people in business suits and so on. And it's an important and an interesting part of how we communicate with each other and connect with each other. I will also say that everything in life is a power transaction. Whatever you wear, whatever you say, how you say it, the looks that you give people, the kind of car you drive, it's all about power. And I think that when we, you know, face loss and grief, very often we'll either put on a mask and pretend that everything is fine, or we may actually just let that wonderful, creative, expressive side of ourselves go. But I also think about it a little bit like caterpillar soup. You know, the caterpillar goes into the pupa and it dissolves, but there are imaginal cells in there that reform to create the butterfly that eventually comes out. So potentially, I don't know whether I'm answering your question, you know, we kind of go through a phase of wearing certain kinds of clothes while we're caterpillar soup. And then we come out the other side redefined and present ourselves in our new way.
Another really good answer, Petra. Who's got another great question?
Sorry, Jane. I just want to ask Petra.
Yeah.
The question, what I wanted to find out from that question that Jane just asked you was, during the time that you were going through your pain and the struggle and to come to this decision, has that impacted on how you dress and how you used to dress and how you are dressing now? That's the detail I wanted to find out.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, sorry, then I went off track a bit. No,
that's okay.
You know, I will tell you that I put on 10 kilos within about 2 or 3 months of my husband's diagnosis. And I wasn't changing my diet or anything like that. I was just so stressed.
Yes.
And, you know, I didn't fit into half my clothes.
Yeah.
And I felt lousy about myself on the inside. I felt lousy about myself on the outside. And I think then that, you know, that who I am today is a reclaimed self. And now I'm wearing many of my old clothes. I feel, you know, I always felt great about myself in some way, but the difference was that my locus of control was in my external world. What could I create? What could I make happen in order to define myself? And I was conflated with all of that. Whereas now my locus of control is within. And unfortunately, you know, I've worn far too many tracksuits, you know, during COVID. You know, I love clothes and I love jewelry and I love perfume and I enjoy all of those things. And so I'm back and able to relish them. But no, there hasn't been a massive style evolution, honestly, if that answers the question. I think it has really been much more of an internal shift.
Yes, yes. That actually answered the question, because the reason I was asking the question was where your mindset was and what role that plays into when you get up in the morning. How do you feel? What do you feel like wearing? Do you still wear the things you used to wear? So the question was around what impact your mindset has on your outlook on a daily basis as you go through the pain and then coming out of it and then coming to this decision to put it all into a book form. So I think that is very powerful, because
I do think it speaks to self-care. You know, I hated myself. I wished I wasn't here.
Yeah.
And when I could really care about myself again and say, I have something to contribute, and I do matter, and I belong, and I've got something inside me, some inner metal. I'm going to go there, and I'm going to fight my way out of this hole.
Yes.
Then I could care for myself again. I could respect myself again. Yes, I wanted to put on the perfume. I wanted to put on the nice clothes.
Yes.
But I kind of, I do think that sometimes self-care can even come before feeling better about yourself, because you know, if you hang around in tracksuits and you eat unhealthy food, you're creating a physiology that doesn't give you the best platform to try to rally. So that's what I'd say to that.
Okay, that's good.
Very interesting, though. So many ways to have a look at what the impact of the actual normal is on people.
Yes. And you know, look, we've got a few minutes left, but I did say that I was going to help you be a force for change in your own life. And I wonder, would it be a good idea to just quickly share a little acronym that I have?
Yes, I'd love that.
So, you know, the acronym is ACCEPT, not surprisingly. And it's funny because I had written down these particular points that I wanted to bring to this. And then it turned out that actually it read accept. And I thought, well, this was meant to be. So the first thing is awareness. We can't do anything about what we can't see. And self-awareness particularly, you know, we have this internal talk that is very much about what's fair and unfair, what shouldn't have happened. And it creates an attitude, which is another A actually. If we see the universe as a benevolent force, and in some ways, if you think about life, it is a benevolent force that comes through everything that's living, that what's happening to us may actually be happening for us, and that we may actually be interpreting things in our own particular way and not actually as they are. That awareness can be empowering in itself. And if we are working on growing our awareness, then we are, I mean, I didn't actually use this analogy, which I should have done. If we think of our awareness as torchlight, you know, the more that the beam falls on, the more that is illuminated, the better our choices can be, the more that we can see ourselves in a context and know, there's a watering hole over there, or there are mountains over there, that's our destination, there's a sort of a vision or a purpose. You know, awareness gives us so much power, just in enabling us to see more. And what we can see, we can then do something about. Then the biology of growing awareness, as I call it, is curiosity. You know, rather than being right, be curious. See us all as interconnected. Think about the thing that's happened to you as something that's happened for you, and be curious about what you could do, rather than get closed down and defensive about it. From that place, take charge of your choices. That's the second C. You know, the truth is our lives and who we are in them is the sum total of the choices we've made. And when we make new and better choices, we are going to be the source of new and better effects. To make good choices, work on your character. They're also what keep you upright in difficult times, but they enable you to make the kinds of choices we were talking about before, which are responsive rather than reactive ones. And they help us to, and character helps us to actually face the difficult times while we're waiting for the effects of good choices to kick in. Engage is the E. You know, collaborate with yourself, with life, with others, with possibility. Share, mentor, try to get out there and do things. Don't stay home just licking your wounds. Get yourself involved in making your life something. And if it's very difficult to do for you, do it for others. It makes an incredible difference in your life. The T is take responsibility. Take charge of yourself and your life, and decide what you want it to be and who you want to be in it, and then reach for that, strive for that. Life is not just about what happens to us. It is about who we choose to be in the space of what happens to us. Don't make excuses for what you're like. Decide who you want to be and then reach for that self. So take responsibility. You're in the driver's seat. And basically, you know, the time is ripe for change now, for us to move into something new and be responsive to a new context, to find these new selves that we need to be in a world that potentially is shifting permanently and won't go back to this other thing that we think will come back when the pause button is unpaused after COVID. So that's my message to you. Accept and work on those things, and you'll find that you can really make a big difference in your life. And the really, really empowering statement is, I am not my health, my disability, my situation, my circumstances. I am myself first. Sculpt that self and go out there and become the greatest person that you can think of being. That is what you're here to do, to grow into that.
Wow, what a message. What a point to leave on. Although what I want to do before we do finish up is just, what's the best way for people to contact you if they want to?
Look, at this point, LinkedIn, but I have got a website, petrapaige.com, which it's my old website. I've just about finished the new one and I'll replace it, and there'll be a contact there. But in the meantime, yeah, you can find me there, or you can find me on Facebook.
Great. Look, thank you so much, Petra. That's just been such a wonderful session that you managed to put so many ideas into such a short period of time. And I think there's a whole bunch of people now who want to get a hand on that book, because you've really, really nailed so many aspects of what people are struggling with at the moment. We see it in the news every day. We see it in people's faces. We see the fear, we see the disempowerment, but your message of empowerment, I think, is absolutely fair enough to say is of this moment, is really, really important right now.
Well,
so I want to thank
you, Jane.
Oh, you're thanking me. I want to thank you for writing the book, because there's going to be a ripple effect. I say this about all my authors' books, but I know there'll be a ripple effect here, and it's that you are the force for good.
Well, thank you, Jane. That is exactly what I'd like to be. And thank you so much for encouraging me over this line. It has made such a difference, to get the book finished, and this is my first time of really speaking it out loud to everybody. And I'm so grateful to all of you for being here, for asking the great questions you have, for being interested. And I do hope that, I will see you along the way going forward.